والآن الكلمة للأستاذ تيم كارلتون. تيم كارلن من صندوق النقد الدولي، وهو رئيس بعثة الصندوق للمملكة. طبعا الصندوق مهتم جدا بقضايا كفاءة الإنفاق والحوكمة، حتى أن الصندوق عمل ليتلي دراسة على قضية كفاءة الاستثمار في الدول النفطية، وتكلم على كيف كفاءة الإنفاق في الدول النفطية مقارنة بالدول المتقدمة اقتصاديا. فالكلمة الآن للأستاذ تيم لك 7 دقائق إلى 8 دقائق. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raja, and thank you for inviting me to participate. So I was struck by the first 2 presentations, which I think rightly made the point about the big improvements in terms of private sector governance and monitoring that have gone on in Saudi Arabia through the efforts of the CMA companies themselves in recent years. And I think it's very relevant in terms of thinking about sort of what the government really needs to do to catch up with that. So what I'm going to focus on is really disclosure, monitoring, and then maybe a little bit in terms of skills, talents that were listed as the 5 principles of governance earlier. So in terms of disclosure and monitoring, I mean, I think it's fair to say that overall fiscal transparency in Saudi Arabia at the moment is very weak. Little budget information is provided. That means there's little scrutiny in terms of the way the government raises and spends its money. I think one of the objectives in the National Transformation Programme was to improve Saudi Arabia's scoring on the Open Budget Index, which I think is a very important objective. And I think the Minister of Finance has recently been saying that the government will start publishing fiscal data on a quarterly basis. So I think one of the key areas in terms of improving overall governance is greater transparency, greater provision of data on the broad fiscal side. A second area, I think clearly as a shareholder of a company that you want to do is to be able to monitor the performance of that company, and clearly disclosure is an important part of that. I think in terms of monitoring the performance of government, again, it's something that has only recently been considered, but where I think a lot of steps have been taken in terms of introducing the key performance indicators for government ministries and agencies. I think here, though, as experience in many countries has shown, it's a very difficult process, right? Being able to accurately get an indicator that is really helping you in terms of identifying and monitoring the performance towards, at the end, what is a desired output of the government. Is not easy, and making sure that those performance indicators are consistent across different ministries in terms of reaching the overall goals of the government as an entity rather than as a group of individual ministries. So I think this is a very important area. I think there's going to be a lot of learning by doing as this process goes on. But I think it's a general principle in terms of being able to allow people to better monitor the spending and the work of the government ministries. This is very important. And then a third area I wanted to touch on, which I think is loosely linked to the skills and talent point, is really the efficiency of public investment and maybe public spending more broadly. And I think here it's not a question of asking the government to go on the cheap, as it were, but it's really providing good value services, whether they be health, whether they be public investment projects, roads, railways, whatever, that you want to get value for money out of the government's revenues. And there, I think it's a question of having in place good processes in terms of identification of those projects, doing cost-benefit analysis, the procurement procedures, how you monitor the project as it goes on, and then reviewing the outcomes of the project and learning lessons. And maybe one thing here that I think is overlooked a lot is also making sure it's not just in terms of a public investment project doing the project, but you need to allocate within the budget enough money to operate and maintain that project once it's up and ready to go. I think studies, if you look globally, show that if you can increase public investment efficiency, the growth benefits, and at least if you look at the macro indicators in terms of public, the contributions to public investment efficiency, I think Saudi Arabia does have scope to improve. The setting up of the Bureau of Spending Rationalisation, I think working with these processes with ministries is already likely showing some improvements in those processes. But if you look at the example of, say, Norway, where I think improvements in their public investment process were found to significantly reduce costs without affecting the overall performance of those projects. So I'll stop there and hope I'm within my 7 minutes.
Thanks.